little rebel I am, was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So that's where my love for baking sourdough myself came from, really just from watching them purchase it and me not understanding why we weren't making it ourselves.
It's a good point, right? Because if you go into an artisan baker right now, you could drop $16, $18 on a loaf of bread, which probably will not be as good as something that you can make yourself once you know what you're doing, right?
100%. Even I think my worst sourdough loaf baked is better than stuff I buy.
I would 100% agree with that. It is so hard, especially in Australia. It is so hard to buy a good loaf of bread. It's almost impossible. It's all dog shit, but basically.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't want anyone in my family buying bread. I didn't want them spending the money. Companies still put chemicals and preservatives in bread to make it last longer, to be fresher. So you don't know what's going into it. You don't know what flour's used. You don't know what water's used. So that's another love for bringing everything back to basics, is then you know what exactly is going into it. And my mum taught me that from a young age of, if you can make something from scratch, then you know what goes into it. So she always said, and my sister says, eat dessert every day, just make it yourself.
It's a good point.
It's as long as you know what's going into it, then that's the most powerful thing. And then when I started making sourdough, I realized why my sisters hadn't done it. I was like, this shit is confusing.
Why so? Why? Because it does seem that the general consensus, if you speak to the average person, is they don't fully understand how it works. It seems like this really confusing, convoluted process. You have to be basically a trained chemist to be able to get it done.
I feel like every artisan sourdough baker just made a pact to not tell anyone that it could be done. Like, I feel like I've broken the silence code with simple sourdough.
You've exposed the secrets.
Exactly, that it doesn't have to be that hard, and the recipe doesn't have to be 5 pages long like all my beautiful sourdough cookbooks that I have.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be really complicated and confusing. We can bring it back and diminish a few steps and just make it doable for everyone.
And so for the person at home, I can assume that some people obviously know how to make sourdough, have given it a go at some point before, whether they've been successful or not. But for the person who doesn't really know, if you could briefly explain what is sourdough? Like, what is it?
Yeah, so I guess what we usually use in bread is dried yeast. We do dried yeast, a bit of salt, flour, water, sometimes some sugar, and then that will start a fermentation process. But instead of dried yeast, we're using a sourdough starter, which is something you keep alive, which is basically like a living, would you say like an organism?
Yeah, I guess it's a living organism. Yeah.
Of just flour and water that is fermenting away. You feed it flour and water every day. The bacteria feeds off that flour and water. Then it eliminates, which is like this gassy, bubbly stuff. And then that is what is making your flour and water, when you mix it with it, rise and grow and ferment. So you've kind of already got this like pre-fermented live mix of healthy bacteria that is then going to grow your dough instead of using a dried yeast. So it's pre-fermented and full of lots of healthy bacteria.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. And I feel like when people hear that, the fear is that they're going to be fermenting something and it's going to kill them, basically.
Yeah, you say bacteria to most people and they freak out.
Because, germs.
Exactly. We've grown up only thinking that there's bad bacteria. But there are trillions of bacteria in the world, and there's so many good ones. Like, our body is made up of so many bacteria, and the more diverse our gut is with these different bacterias, obviously good ones, the better it is for our health.
Yeah.
And people freak out, like when you're growing something, you're wanting, it's full of bacteria and you're keeping that alive. But as soon as bad bacteria gets in there, for example, the most common one, mold, you'll see mold straight away. And so then you chuck it. Like, you don't use it. You discard it.